kind of a long bit of text here. It says, we still have black political prisoners that are exiled and still locked up here in America. Is Assata Shakur a sign that we have failed other people like her and ourselves? Have black people, let me find a continuation, gotten too comfortable and abandoned the real black liberation movement? So this is just a gentle reminder. Make the prompts a little bit short. I think it's 100. I think it's 100 characters. You go beyond that, then we have situations like this where we can't fit the whole thing on the screen. Just a general reminder. But this came with a attachment. Let me share that with you guys. Yeah, I think it's this one. Yeah, it should be this one. So let me make sure you guys can see my screen. Looks like you can't yet. Okay, now it looks like you can see my screen. This is a tweet from Woods. He says, RIP to an icon, Black American freedom fighter, Assata Shakur. So I want to play the video and then we'll discuss it.
I was put in a maximum security unit in a cell with 2 guards in front of the cell 24 hours a day, and a cell between 2 gun towers that could train them directly on the cell. I was told that I was in the Yardville unit for women, even though I was the only woman, and they tried to keep me there for the rest of my life. My grandmother came to visit me there to tell me a dream, and she came with all of my family, and everybody was happy, and I'm like, what's happening with y'all? This look, she had a dream. I was like, okay. And so my grandmother's dream was that she was dressing me, that she was in an old house that she lived in when she lived in New York still, and she was putting clothes on me. I said, is that the dream? She said, that's the dream. And I said, well, was I little or big? She said, no, you were big. So I said, oh my God, the only time people dress anybody when they're grown is when they're dead. And so she said, no, I know what you're thinking. No. What this dream means is that you are going to leave this prison. I don't know when, but it's going to be much less time.
All right. Once again, RIP Assata Shakur. In the chat, Joe says, good evening. Good evening to Joe. Saw her this week as well. Good seeing all of y'all down there. Just real quick, Assata Shakur was born Joanne Chesimard. She was a Black Liberation Army fighter, Black Panther member, and activist who became a revolutionary and then a fugitive after a 1973 shootout on the New Jersey Turnpike, in which a state trooper was killed. She was able to flee to Cuba, and she remained exiled in Cuba until her death this past week. I think one of your first books when you're trying to figure it out and enter into the conscious stage of your travels, I think is you should read Assata. Like I said earlier, you should definitely read Malcolm X. And thirdly, you should read Garvey. But Assata, I think, is a very pivotal book, and I think she was a very interesting person, someone we should be talking about a bit more, as a matter of fact. With that said, though, let me throw it to my panel. Let me start with Jack Cadero. Jack Cadero, what are your thoughts on this prompt? Have we failed her, Assata Shakur, and ourselves?
Ooh, all right. So first, man, rest in power to Assata Shakur. An awesome and awesome individual, man. Give me one moment. I got tea. Give me a moment. Hold on. All right. Yeah, an awesome individual. A lot of us couldn't even hold a branch to her. Not only do I have her book, I've read her book, but I think it was my last year in college, 2021, the winter of 2021. I worked for a cleaning company, and the diesel garage that I had been assigned for 2 weeks. In the lounge area of that diesel garage, there was Time magazine issues, and one of them was the greatest prison escapes. Assata made the front cover of that, and it went into detail about her prison escape. I think from the New Jersey institution, I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong, but nonetheless, it went into detail how they did it, who did it, what IDs were left, what equipment was used, etc. The moment that I moved out of my apartment before graduation, I never saw that magazine ever again. So I took it with me from that diesel garage, but I never saw it ever again. It's just one of those things that I'm either way too paranoid or it was just like, hey, I just misplaced it, but I cleaned out my entire apartment. Nonetheless, it was awesome getting to read in-depth detail on how this was done, how the prison escape was done. As far as, have we failed? To the question of Shoot the Breeze, topic number one, have we failed? I don't think we failed. I don't believe so. One, because we're kicking ass, man. In America, it might not seem like that just because we're bombarded with a whole host of things, especially our failures. We get bombarded with that. But our success stories, man, let's just talk about since she's been since she escaped the United States, South Sudan became a country. For those that don't understand that, like, they fought the Arab world. The way that we like to look at Gaddafi and say, like, hey, like NATO, a 14-member political bloc, got rid of his military and armed his rebels, and then also sent fighter jets and killed him, and sent him into, I think he was found in like a ditch or like a hole, and then like his own citizens like killed him. But nonetheless, it's like that's pretty much what South Sudan had going against them. South Sudan became a nation up against the Arab world. The entire Arab world didn't want them to become a nation. So that's one. Two, I mean, we got the AES, Assimi Goïta, Abdul Tishiani, and then Ibrahim Traore. They've succeeded from ECOWAS, the West African bloc. And I just want to let you know, like, if Kenya's always, you know what, let me watch my words here. Somebody's trying to go home soon. But if there's a certain East African country that has been known as a West African puppet, West Africa's example or model would be Nigeria, and it's always been Nigeria. And so for when they first said we're leaving, it wasn't taken as serious. And then when they actually did it, there was a lot of tension. Political experts had predicted that there might be war because they, had mentioned, or at least ECOWAS had mentioned that, hey, if you don't come back, we're going to bring you back, and we're not going to be asking you guys to come back. And then even now, I'd say more so, and this is what I at least believe. I believe more of our political supremes on our side have just went underground. And again, I'm not a political activist at all, or a social activist, none by themselves, or even a revolutionary. But I do know that to operate in public, it's very risky when you're living in the place that you're at war at. She was living in the United States, and she had to escape the United States in order to pretty much live the rest of her life, quote unquote, free. I've never been to Cuba, so I don't exactly know on like what her life was like up until her death. I hope it was a peaceful death. And do I feel like we've been failing? No. And the examples I have of those African countries and then the Caribbean countries. I know that we all have our different perspectives on the Haiti situation. Again, I want to say this, we all have our perspectives, but at least an African country was like, hey, let alone Haiti during Ariel Henry's time as prime minister is asking for help on this situation, the insecurity situation. At least it was an African country that stepped up and said, we'll at least do something. Because if we don't, who's to say that's going to come? Who's to say who's going to come in? Again, I know that we all have our own differences on the Haiti situation, but at least an African country stepped up. So, no, I don't believe that we're failing. I actually feel like if she were to be able to voice what has been happening in the past 14 years, South Sudan, the AES, and then the Haiti situation, at least, Black peoples are trying to solve their own problems. I feel like she wouldn't be disappointed.
I appreciate that, Jack. I like how you took your time to make your point. And I would advise everyone to do the same, since it's just us here tonight. You guys could take your time with your responses. Bashir Reach topic number 1 says, we still have Black political prisoners that are exiled and still locked up here in America. Is Assata Shakur a sign that we have failed other people like her and ourselves? Have Black people gotten too comfortable and abandoned the real Black liberation movement? With that said, Black Steel, what say you?
I disagree with Jack Adero. I believe that we have failed our political prisoners, and I believe that the level of consciousness from when Assata Shakur was alive has definitely regressed in our people. In the 60s and 70s, coming out the Black Panther Party, the Black Liberation Army, there was a militancy with Black people. There was a consciousness that we had, and that has been severely reduced. Right? We have many of our political prisoners, like Mumia Abu Jamal, who's for all intents and purposes, they're going to make this man rot in jail. You have, former, Imam Jamil, formerly H. Rat Brown, currently a political prisoner. We have Black Panthers who've been in there for 40, 50 years in prison, and yet you never hear about them. But what gets our attention? Oh, Meek Mill got locked up. Lil Wayne got locked up, right? So it seems as though our attention and our focus is not so much on our political prisoners, but on many of these, these rappers and entertainers. And, we hear more about R. Kelly in prison and Diddy. People will sit up here and rally for Diddy and march in the street for people like R. Kelly, but you won't hear a word about Mumia. You don't hear a word about H. Rat Brown. So many of our political prisoners are not only languishing in prison, but they are forgotten. Many of our to the point to where we no longer even really perceive these institutions of state as directly oppositional to African people. Back in Assata's time, right, there was an understanding, a general recognition of who the enemy was, what we were fighting against, what we were fighting for. We were fighting for liberation. We're fighting for our own independent Black nation, be it within the United States, be it within the African continent. We were fighting for liberation. We understood we came from a liberation tradition, right? We came from a revolutionary Black tradition. We understood that to be Black was to be in opposition directly with the United States, with the Western powers, right? We understood that. Now we have people who, instead of fighting against or are in opposition to the system, they want to get closer to the system. And I'm not saying those people didn't exist in Assata's time, but their voices are amplified to a greater degree because the state has perfected the apparatus of propaganda to such a point, right, to where the militant voices get drowned out behind the nonsense, behind we're really the Hebrews of the Bible, or we need to get closer to America. That's our only salvation. We're really the Native Americans or whatever type of nonsense. The real revolutionary black militancy gets completely drowned out, and that's very dangerous at a time like this because we are living in a renaissance of global white hegemony. I'm also for those African nations that are becoming independent, but like Dr. John Henry Clark said, that's flag independence, right? You can wave a flag and say you're free, but at the same time, these European nations are still have access to your resources, and they're draining you dry. So how free are they really? Where you have a United Nations that can vote for something, and one nation can just veto it and cancel it out. How free? How independent are we? The African Union is a joke. I'm glad to see Traore is making moves, but he still has a long way to go. And in the meantime, you have European nations that are funding terrorists in Burkina Faso to help undermine this government. You have a foreign government acting on behalf of terrorists on your nation's soil. You got a lot of work to do. You got a lot of work to do, and I understand that. But I feel like the consciousness from where we were when Assata was and the Panthers and everything else has severely become reduced. And not only has our consciousness become reduced, the attacks towards us have become more relentless. There were literally 2 black men who were lynched not even a week ago. So we have black men, but the attacks on us have not stopped. The federal government has increased their attacks on African people, not just globally, but it's within the boundaries of the United States. Our history is to erase our history. Again, I see a serious regression. Serious regression. We're on the back foot. We're on the back foot. Those are just my thoughts on it. I'll let somebody else speak, but thank you.
Appreciate that, Black Seal. I'll let Jacadero respond to that after we hear from Buana and the chat. Real quick before I go to Buana, in the chat, Coach Pete is out there saying, blessed evening. Blessed evening to you, Coach Pete. Saw him as well this week. Trigger Happy 262 Plus is out there. He says, this is interesting because we can tie this to a recent song made by a female rapper, Monelio, in which she emphasizes Soliwan. The issue is that people don't know about the Republic of New Africa. He goes on to say many of our people do not know about their revolutionary history, so they won't fight for their political prisoners, which makes sense for how America wants to operate. He says it's regressed in the intellectual wing drastically, but it never will grow in the institution of others. Lastly, he says, from Republic of New Africa and the Black Liberation Army to FBA and ADOS. With that said, Juan, you've heard what the chat has to say, Black Steel, Jacadero. What say you to all of it?
Yeah, so in listening to Black Steel and Jacadero, they made me reconsider several things. I was gonna say I have to reconsider it because they made such a clear analysis on how they perceive things, what's going on around them. So I had to reconsider a lot of things I was actually gonna say. But let me start here. In terms of, let's start with the slave experience in the United States and in the Caribbean as well, right? The people who tried to get free and be free in those circumstances was always in the minority. It always was a minority group of people who actually was trying to fight to liberate and free themselves. How the story gets told in 2025, it seemed as if it was this groundswell and all the black people was fighting against their plantation masters to really try to be free. And that's not actually true. The people who fought or really escaped or really tried to get into their own enclaves of freedom and live apart and away from, they always represented a minority group of people. Because the truth is, and this is uncomfortable truth, many of us accepted our fate on them plantations. Even into the generations, we accepted our fate. Now, when Martin Luther King was walking around, Martin Luther King wasn't a popular figure among black people. And it would seem as if that black people didn't want civil rights. You know, it would seem as if that because he wasn't a popular figure among many black Christian-minded people in the United States of America. If you look at the history of that, even Malcolm X, it was only after the fact where uh, um, people was in a different place, they started to recognize, oh, this person was a great person, this person did it. But the majority of people didn't. Many Christian pastors didn't want Martin Luther King nowhere near them. Nowhere near them. You know, so, and then now, and even when the Black Panthers was walking around, you know, you see pictures of them having large representations of black people, but the reality is the majority of black people wasn't with that cause. You know, they see it as very agitative kind of situation, and they didn't want to get involved. Many people, many of us don't want this idea of freedom, because freedom, whether we want to know it or not, it represents responsibility. You know, I mean, you have to be responsibility for every aspect of human behavior and that reality. And many people are comfortable, you know, having these things set out for them. Set out for them. Many of us comfortable with that, you know, and I would understand why the consciousness, it would appear that the consciousness level is not there. But the same minority group of people who's on the plantation trying to get free, those people are still being represented right now. You know, there are many people all over the world, even in the United States, whether they leaving or doing things, it just doesn't capture the media's attention. Because the Western idea or paradigm is not to have that behavior put on Front Street. They already had a time where Farrakhan was becoming very popular at one time, and the media say, well, we don't want that. You don't want that because that is going to create a growing consciousness, and we don't want that. But the people are still around. They just are not getting the media attention, you know, or popular attention. The algorithms will never promote them, just like how they would never promote us. And it's not to say that we are not presenting good information, but it's not something that I would say the system, but it's not what the system would actually support or get behind, because it's going against the paradigm of what these people are trying to push. But let me start with the question though. Let me get with the question. In terms of using the word failure or failed, failed is almost like a word of a conclusion. It's almost like the battle has been fought already, and now we are assessing winners and losers. But the war or the fight for freedom, justice, and equality with black people is a protracted war. It's a protracted one. Ever since we reached this part of the Western world, and it's not concluded as yet. So to assess failure and winning right now, you in the middle of the game. You know, you can't assess failure and success in the middle of the game, because whether I want to admit it or not, Assata Shakur is just a cog in the wheel of black liberation. Because before Assata Shakur, there are many other women like her, and there are many women after her as well. You know, but she continued on a particular line, and there will be other Assata Shakurs or other people in that vein of resistance and liberation. So I wouldn't suggest that we have failed. What I think is happening right now, in terms of the American experiment, that is a failing idea. That is a failing idea, and I think that what's happening right now is, as history has been set, where you had succession, where Texas wanted to succeed and break away, and all these states wanted to do their own thing. I think that that's what's actually happening in America right now. You know what I mean? I think that America really, and I don't, excuse me, brothers, for talking about the United States, and I am in the United States, but I think that as they break away, I think that the black people inside of America need to stake their claim, because everybody's saying now, man, F this experiment, we got to do our own thing. We don't trust the government. We don't trust the system. We don't trust our leaders. And the United States seem to be breaking apart. That experiment is actually failing. So the question becomes, what is black people going to do in those circumstances? What are black people going to decide to do? Of course, you're going to have the majority of black people who are going to cling on to the coattail of you know who. You know, even with the Titanic going down, even with the Titanic going down, they're gonna cling to the coattail. But there are gonna be other black people who can look at and assess the situation and say, what must I do in this time, in this situation? You know what I mean? Because if America falls apart, where am I gonna be? What's gonna happen to my family? You know, what's gonna happen to me? You know, but you know, to bring it down to a local level, I think I cry. I say that what happened to people like Assata Shakur, I'm glad that when she passed or transitioned, she's transitioned as a free lady. I don't like what happened to Matulu Shakur. Matulu Shakur, see 5 minutes of freedom, and then he was gone. And and the brother was right. Black C was right. There are political prisoners not only in the United States but all over the European world and black world that we have never heard about. You know, there's a brother who I used to, I'm not even gonna call his, I can't even call his name, you know, because that's a touchy subject. But the United States government put him in jail because of the words that he was saying. You know, because of the words he said. 18 years. He went to jail in London, and when he came to Jamaica, back to Jamaica, the United States government listened to what he had to say and lock him up in jail for 18 years now. You know, to me, he's a political prisoner, religious one, but a political prisoner as well. And most Black Americans or Black people in general in this side of the world have never even heard about him. He was a very famous dude in the UK, you know, Jamaican dude. So I don't know. I think that the conflict and the struggle that the Black people find themselves in is in a protracted one, and to assess failure and success is really to assess that in the middle of the game. And Black people always have the opportunity to recover. And I think that this struggle have an ebb and flow to it. There are times where you see the consciousness level rise, and there are times you see the consciousness level fall. I think that Kwame Ture talked about that. And I think that there's going to be a resiliency and a comeback to this idea of Black consciousness as it was in the past. But I think that we in the ice age now. You know, I think that people may not be able to see it, but it's going to come back. It's going to come back. It's always been an ebb and flow between Marcus Garvey and Malcolm X and all these other people. There's always been an ebb and flow. Always been an ebb and flow. And there used to be Black American nativists back in the early 1930s too, and 20s as well. And then you see their return in 2025. You know, I think that we just consider time, just consider your own personal work and effort, what you should be doing at this time. But I think that Black people are going to come to themselves and make it. I think I have more optimism. I don't look at us in terms of pessimism. I look at us as very optimistically, you know. But I'll leave it there. I'll leave it.
Real quick, Buana, I just want to be clear. Are you saying that there's been people before her and people after her, so we shouldn't really put too much stock in her? I'm just trying to be clear.
No. When I see Assata Shakur favor my mother, you know, and I read her book back in the time. But Assata Shakur, she understands that she is a part of she is connected to global people who are struggling and trying to achieve a particular thing, right? She's a part of a collective. I think that sometimes we get in this idea of personalities, and she wouldn't even represent herself that way. The media does that. You know, Assata Shakur always talking in terms of community, you know, family, a part of being a collective. So within that experience, she recognized she has to do her part. She have to, just as we have to do our part. John Henry Clark said, when a great man dies, you bury that man and continue to plan. That's what John Henry Clark said. And that's what we should be doing. Her life is a message to everyone else in her community and collective to say, well, yes, we love Assata Shakur, but now that she is gone, we bury her and continue her struggle. We continue what she had in mind in one and for us, which is freedom, injustice, and all these other kind of great-minded things. You know, but that's what I mean when I say that.
I appreciate that clarification. In the chat, Kofi the Black Critic says we all, as Pan-Africans, should feel that we have failed her. He says, when we here in America go to vote, these are the demands that we should be making. If politicians is about, and for black people, let our people out of jail. Our political prisoners should be let out. Earlier, D. Webb and the parents in the chat, he said, peace, family. Hope everyone is well. Same to you, D. Webb. Earlier, still, KW7 says MLK was a Zionist shill. Before I let anyone kind of speak to any other comment that was made, let me welcome in Real Black Gentleman to the panel. Real Black Gentleman, RBG, how are you this week? You're muted if you're talking, RBG. All right, look like RBG isn't here right in this minute. So, Jackadero, you heard what Black Steel and Juan had to say. You saw the chat had to say. Do you have anything to say in response?
Yeah, let's start with Black Steel. So, you say that our black prisoners in the United States are still incarcerated. Most of them will probably die in incarceration. But who's, besides Obama, who is mixed, who would have the opportunity to grant clemency? Who would have that? Because as far as my political and civic knowledge goes, the president of the United States can only give clemency towards federal crimes and not state crimes. I'm not 100% sure on if all the or most of the Black revolutionaries are incarcerated for state or federal crimes. That's number one. Number two, we talk about how, the Panthers and any sect or any splinter cells of the Panthers and anything alike are not as existent anymore. But I think we don't understand that the United States has two intelligence agencies. Well, three, right? The CIA, FBI, forgetting the other one as well. But we have intelligence agencies.
The NSA. Okay, we have three intelligence agencies that operate here. This doesn't relate, but at least it will try to add my point. After September 11th, Islamophobia was high in the United States. One of the things that is on record was that they were sending either informants or agents themselves into masjids in the United States. One of them being in Cali. I'm not sure on the place, but one of them being in Cali. And so this agent and or informant had befriended members of the masjid. And I think these Middle Easterners or Iranians, I'm not 100% sure, they were hanging out with him back at their place. And some news story came about where the suspect was of Middle Eastern descent or Middle Eastern themselves. And the informant was like, hey, we should do something about that, as if like he was trying to rile them up. Do you know what those Muslims did? The Muslims actually called the FBI and said, hey, we got a guy here that is talking about retaliation for a suspect that he feels was wrongly adjusted. Just to bring that to you home, we have people among us here in the United States that we have to take a second look and be like, I'm not 100% sure on who you're working for. I'm not 100% sure on who you are partnering with. I'm not 100% sure on what type of intel that you're trying to collect on me. And then you have to ask yourself, those days of Phil Donahue hosting guys like Khalid Muhammad, that doesn't exist anymore. Like I think it was, I'm not sure on which white boy, but some white boy that was suspended and then that was brought back this week because of his comments towards Charlie Kirk. You think he would host Tariq Nasheed? I know that we don't like to use him as an example, but he's an example nonetheless. He at least is holding the line on
the Charlie Kirk pushback. I've never seen Tariq Nasheed on a late night talk show host, but we saw Khalid Muhammad on Phil Donahue. Just think about that. Oprah Winfrey, I think, had, other individuals the like of on her show as well. That's not happening anymore. We're not going to see these people. The only way that you're going to is if you're in the know or you're going through the depths of social media. It's tough. We are in the country that we are trying to get liberation from, but this country has said time and time again, that's not happening, not under our watch. You talk about political prisoners. I don't dive into this as much, but the reparations conversation, at least for right now, that's not happening. At least for right now. I can't say about the next 10 to 20 years, but at least for the next 10 to 20 years, that's not even being entertained. So why would we think that we're going to see the new Black Panther Party or any of its splinter cells or anything the like we are going to see on a national level? Just to give you a localized viewpoint, here in Omaha, we have the Black Agenda Alliance. It's pretty much a social Black militant group. And there was a time where during one of the Juneteenth festivals, police tried to agitate them. And Nebraska is one of those states where it's an open conceal, not open conceal, but it's a no permit conceal, something like that. You don't have to have a permit. And these brothers were brandished with semi-assault rifles and in the face of police officers. The same way that if anybody's ever read Negroes with Guns by Robert F. Williams, how he said, hey, we were telling police, you need to lay down your arms. And some of the police did. And some of the onlookers were so distraught that they started crying, like, what kind of country do I live in where I have N-words telling our policemen to put down their guns? That episode at the Juneteenth celebration here in Omaha, that made one of our Black newspapers. That didn't make the Omaha Herald. That didn't make any of the other citywide publications. So I say this to say that we have censorship to the 10th power here in the United States. I'm not sure on if you're going to see that. So to compare and say, like, we failed her because, these groups or these individuals or these accomplishments we're not seeing, I'd say you got to open your eyes. I don't know if we're going to be seeing that. We have less representation, at least politically, than we did in Reconstruction era. So, like, who's going to be granting those things? Again, I bring up clemency because it's not just political prisoners. There was just a guy a few years ago that was locked up for 38 years and he was granted, I'm not 100%, something in the millions of dollars because it was proven that he didn't even commit the crime. It behooves us. And that wasn't even a Black revolutionary guy. I'm forgetting his name, but that wasn't even a Black revolutionary guy. And it took the United States, not us. It took the United States and his team of lawyers, probably working pro bono, to get him out of prison after 38 years. And then back to Buana. I'm not 100% sure on MLK not being liked, but I do know that with Malcolm, I'm not 100% sure on if Malcolm didn't exist to the point and the level that he was at, if we would have Islam in America among Black communities in the United States like the way that we've had in the past 60 years. There's kids that aren't even Muslim that are named Jamal, that are named Rashid, that have these Arabic names and their grandfather's the same. I'm not 100% sure. And if Malcolm wasn't like the way that I think you alluded to, if you're saying his impact wasn't there, and you might say, well, it might have been after the fact. I'm not 100% sure. Malcolm was so influential that in Harlem, there's a story when a case of police brutality broke out. Black Muslims exited the masjid in mass and started fighting with police, fist fighting. And one of the brothers went to go get Malcolm that was down the street and said, hey, can you come and calm things down? He stepped on the stage, on the podium, and all he did was just raise his hand. All he did was raise his hand. No words. No words. All he did was raise his hand, and everything came to a calm, and the brothers went back into the masjid. Brothers went back into the corner stores. So, again, I don't know about MLK, but I do know about Malcolm. You're saying he might not have been as liked when he was alive. I'm not 100% sure. Remember, the person that they asked for commentary after the death of JFK, it wasn't anybody else. They asked Malcolm when he was approaching, I think, a Miami airport and said, what are your thoughts on the assassination of JFK? And, he said the famous line, I never felt bad when chickens would come home to roost. If we didn't like him like that, I don't know if news stations would be going out of their way to get the opinion of a guy that, again, that people don't like.
Appreciate that,
Jack Adele. I think you're speaking with the hindsight of history, right? When Malcolm X was alive, he did not have he was not a popular figure amongst the 22 million black people that were in the United States at that time. Same thing with Dr. King. Dr. King was not a popular figure. And in fact, his popularity decreased, especially when he spoke out against the war in Vietnam. So we look back through history, right? And we see these men. But when they were alive in their current time, they were not popular figures. They were very.
Are we sure about that? This is the same. Wait. This is the same MLK that not only was invited to the crowning ceremony and the swearing in of Kwame Nkrumah of Ghana. He was there. Him and his wife were personally invited by Kwame Nkrumah to see the swearing in of Kwame Nkrumah and officially inducting. Ghana, no more of the Gold Coast. Number 2.
So Jack Adele says Martin Luther King's approval rate very significantly, plummeting to as low as 33% in 1966.
And that's the guy that was chosen to go and represent African Americans in Ghana. I just want you to be clear on this. This is
yes. By the time of his assassination, King had a 75% disapproval rate.
And imagine that's okay. And that number might be true, but imagine that's the guy that they picked, that they said, not Adam Clayton Powell Jr., not him, not anybody else. Him, they said, we want you here to witness the swearing in of our first black president.
And I can respect that, but that doesn't necessarily mean he was a popular figure, not just with black people either. So even with, right now, right? Excuse me, talking about the Black Liberation Army with Assata Shakur. Most black people did not look upon the actions of the Black Liberation Army very favorably. Picking up arms, going up and fight the U.S. government, robbing from banks and blowing up armored trucks and whatnot. They look very negatively. Now, with the hindsight of history, and that's how history works, right? That's how it works. You go back and you look at things. Thank you, real black gentleman. It was a black woman who stabbed Dr. King in his chest and almost killed him. Thank you, real. Thank you for reminding me of that.
So you don't think that there's crazies everywhere, though? You don't think that woman?
No, I think there are crazies everywhere. However, we can't ignore the fact that, for the most part, from looking at our political prisoners, right? We don't even know a lot of their names. Right? And I believe that much of our revolutionary energy, much of the energy and the fight we have, what happens, it gets funneled, right? And a good example of that is Black Lives Matter, right? When they murdered Mike Brown, Freddie Gray, the brother, who was the brother in New York who got choked out and said he couldn't breathe?
Eric Gardner. Yeah.
Thank you, Eric Gardner, right? There was a lot of rage, a lot of anger coming from black people. All of a sudden, this new movement shows up, Black Lives Matter, okay? What are they talking about? Voter registration. Black men are the problem. Patriarchy is the problem. We need feminism. So at the same time, you're using these black men's deaths to get noticed, but you don't want any black men in your to lead your movement. You see what I'm saying? But a lot of that energy that we had got funneled into the Black Lives Matter organization. And what did they do with the money and all the grants they got from the Ford Foundation? They bought a mansion. They were gonna make a cooking show, and they didn't do none of that shit. One girl ended up giving her baby daddy $2 million to do some renovation in the house, but nothing came from it. But and that's what we're faced with when we have when Black people are correctly, justifiably angry, right? A lot of that energy that would be funneled into revolutionary organizations and movements gets funneled into then Barack Obama shows up. You guys go vote. When I believe it was around the time Trayvon Martin was killed, right? And every player in the NBA was going to go on boycott. Like they were not going to play at all until George Zimmerman was brought to justice. What happened? Obama shows up and he says that we should turn the basketball courts into voting booths. So that revolutionary energy that Black people have, and we've always had, has turned around and it gets converted and funneled into basically nothing by supporting the Democratic Party. And we get real comfortable. We're comfortable, and while we're getting comfortable, and who was it? I think y'all know if anybody of you read Derek Bell. He has a book called the guy who created critical race theory. One of the main points of his critical race theory is that he talks about the permanence of racism. Racism is a permanent feature. It's a feature, not a bug, of Western civilization, especially in the United States. It is a permanent fixture. Whenever Black people move towards to organize and to eliminate racism, white people will always double and triple down. That's what the whole Trump thing, that's what this whole MAGA movement is. It's a response to Obama literally becoming president. Because what happened? First you had a Tea Party, then Trump came on and say, "Oh, I don't think he's not really born in the United States." And I'm not accusing Obama of being a Black revolutionary, because he definitely wasn't. He actually increased the bounty on Assata from 1 million to 2 million. So fuck his life. But I'm just saying, fuck his life. But I'm just everything we're seeing right now in this country as this resurgence of white. Basically, we're in a renaissance of white supremacy, right? This is all a backlash to having a Black president. I truly believe that. This once the reins of power. So I don't think we're responding appropriately to this never-ending threat. People want to talk about, you want to talk about reparations. That's cool. People who want to move to Africa, that's cool. But at least talk about something. I get tired of hearing let's get we're real Native Americans, we get our tribal rights, or we can get reparations from the government and F these foreigners. I get tired of hearing that. It's not happening. But no, I'm sorry, I got two other points. No, Dr. King was not popular when he was alive. He was not popular, especially after he announced the Vietnam War. And Malcolm X, the Nation of Islam, one of the biggest complaints about the nation, and Malcolm talked about it in his autobiography, is that people would say the Muslims talk a good game, but they don't do anything. At least Dr. King, and they out here getting beat upside the head and marching and whatnot, for Black people. Whereas the Muslims aren't active. No, they don't bother people unless somebody bothers them. So that was a complaint they had, the everyday rank and file lumping Black person had back then in the 60s. We've sanitized Malcolm's image, but back in when he was alive, that was a real complaint. What are you doing? You're talking with with the good game, but again, you're not physically in the street. And I think Dr. King tried to change that. That's why he went to Selma a few weeks before he died. He went to Selma during that march that they had. But I'll stop there. Thank you. I'm sorry. I'm going to take over you, Jacadero.
No. I mean, maybe we just see differences of how popular these guys were, but besides just Ghana, Malcolm was invited. Like his whole Mecca trip, it was an Africa trip before Mecca. Before he went to Mecca, he traveled all around Africa. He stopped in Nigeria. The reason why we call him Omo Wale is because he went to a Yoruba chief, and the Yoruba chief gave him a name of Omo Wale. Again, this is a guy that we say that it wasn't as popular at the time, but yet he was given a whole ceremony in Yoruba land. MLK was invited to Ghana. And then also, MLK was one of the higher fundraisers for the airlift program, the scholarship program that brought Kenyan students to the United States. One of them being Wangari Maathai, the first Black woman to receive a Nobel Peace Prize. Again, I'm just saying, like, if he wasn't that popular, I'm not 100% sure on if Jackie Robinson, who was the founder and the financer of the airlift program for Kenyan students coming and studying at HBCUs and PWIs, predominantly white institutions, I don't know if they would have asked him. Again, we can say these people weren't popular, but these people were known. Popular? I don't know. Maybe they weren't popular, but were they well known? Were they giants? You'd have to be kidding yourself to say that they weren't. But again, we might just be on two different sides of it, Blackstone.
With that said, man, Juana, I guess that bad weather caught up to him. But in the meantime, Real Black Gentleman is here. Real Black Gentleman, how are you this week?
I'm good.
Yes, sir. I'm glad you're here. What are your thoughts on the 2 degrees topic?
Just rusting the essence to Assata. You know what I'm saying? She was a soldier and she did everything that we could ask for and more. You know what I'm saying? Just by just being strong and doing what she had to do. I mean, trying to having the fact that she couldn't come back to America. You know what I'm saying? Like, there's something to be said about that. I mean, like, the way the United States has its vendettas against Black people and people who strongly identify as Black, much more so than America or wherever would be an acceptable identity or all that. The way that they go after them and have no sense of, like, okay, you done lived your life. You lost all your spunk. You know what I'm saying? Like, the political, there's a lot of talk about politicization of people. You know what I'm saying? Like, like, Black people get politicized. We are the politicized people on earth. We are the people that are crafted by policy more than, almost as much as culture, to be honest. Exile. She was effectively exiled from America, the place of her birth. And so, I mean, there was no sense of wanting to bring her back, no sense of saying, like, we won't, you know what I'm saying? Like, everything that she strove to do, she did and more. No one, when she left the country, I don't think in her wildest dreams she would imagine that she would have the pull up until her, and it's still going. Because, I mean, people are going to talk about Assata forever. Understand? She has made herself into a legend. It's not just and this is where it goes to the idea of trying to, like, you have people who are willing to act on their ideals, good, bad, ugly, or indifferent, and you know what I'm saying. Black people getting away. There was a story about a dude named Richard Wright. He had he took over a plane, right, and he found himself in Europe or whatnot, and he was in Portugal. He made it in Portugal. And you know what I'm saying? It's like, Black people, you can agree, disagree with their motives and all that. But their response is to always legitimate grievance, which is basically Black people haven't gotten a fair due for the last 100 years before that, in the 60s, you know what I'm saying, the 100 years before that. And you gotta tip her your hat to her. I mean, it doesn't matter who it is. Like, you gotta recognize the strength of a strong Black woman. And what she is saying is that you can follow through with whatever you need to do, all of your work that you need to do. You can always follow through. There's no reason to fall short. You know what I'm saying? There's no reason to quit. There's no reason to quit. That's all I'm gonna say. I'm gonna say Black Power to Assata Shakur. You know what I'm saying? Rest in the essence. You know what I'm saying? Like, may the ancestors receive her in glory. And that's all I got to say, man. That's all I got to say.
Good stuff, RBG. Real quick in the chat, Trigger Happy said the power of money. When Black Steel was speaking, Kobe said facts, Black Steel. He said the NOI spoke a good game. King was in the fire in the South, while the NOI was in Harlem. Shout out to the To Be Fair show. Brother said, "What's up, fellas?" Daily Affirmations by Pauline says, after all that time, she should have been brought back to the U.S. Funny enough, recently they was trying again to get Assata detained, sent back from Cuba and detained just recently too. Buana is back. Buana, I'll give you the last word, but keep it a little bit brief for me.
I will. I enjoy when I have an opportunity to speak to my brothers, in particular the millennials. You know, the young bulls. The young bulls, they're exuberant. You know, they're exuberant because you see these people now, and you see them being very respected in 2025. So they get very happy about the achievements of these people. But I learn from the millennials, especially in trying to gauge the temperature of where they are, you know, in their minds. But the only thing I would say is we live in a day, chat GPT, that's what they call it, chat, and DeepSeek, where I just ask the question to chat GPT or DeepSeek in terms of the popularity of Martin Luther King or Malcolm X during the time, especially among Black leadership in America, and see what it says. See what it says. But I'll just leave it there, just to be brief. Just to be brief, man.
Appreciate that, Buana. That was a real good discussion centered around Assata Shakur's passing, but to the wider conversation of Black political prisoners, I think I wrote a note about it. I think I might do something where I highlight as many of them as I could find. And maybe I'll do a live on that. So look out for that. Because it's true. We don't know a lot of the Black political prisoners until they die, apparently. So look out for that. In the meantime, though, let's go to Shoot the Breeze topic number 2. Shoot the Breeze topic number 2, I'm sure, is going to cause a bit of a stir because of what we've been discussing so far. Shoot the Breeze topic number 2 says, is a Black Christian / Muslim an oxymoron? This came with a link that looks like it's taking us. Wait, hold on a second. Might be a problem. Damn it. This is taking us to The Guardian, but it's not. Let's see. Let me try and see if I can get it to work. Just give me one quick second here. It's behind one of those paywalls, it seems. Oh no, I'm tripping. There was 2 links, by the way. Let me just go over it quickly. There was 2 links for that first topic. Let me share it with you guys. From The Guardian. My apologies to the poster. I didn't show the second link, but it talks about the 19 Black radicals who are still in prison after 4 decades. So this might be the basis of the live I'll do. Just to go through it real quick, Mumia is mentioned. Delbert Orr, Africa, from the MOVE organization, is still incarcerated. Eddie Goodman, Africa, is still incarcerated. Janet Holloway, Africa, is still incarcerated. A lot of MOVE organization people are still incarcerated. Janine Phillips, Africa. Jaleel Montequim, a.k.a. Anthony Bottom, former Black Panther, is still incarcerated. His face seems familiar to me, too. Matulu Shakur. I think Matulu died, right?
Yeah,
he died after they let him out for like the last, I think, several months of his life.
Right. Russell Maroon Schultz, still incarcerated. Sundiata Akoli, a.k.a. Clark Squire. Chuck Sims, Africa. Michael Davis, Africa. Joseph Bowen, former Black Liberation Army member. These guys are, you can see the ages here. These guys are in the 70s, incarcerated since the 70s. and now in their 70s. So they were young men when they went up. Veronza Bowers Jr., Fred Muhammad Burton, Romaine Chip Fitzgerald, Ruchelle Sink McGee, Ed Poindexter, Kojo Bomani Sababu, Kamar Siddiqui. These are the people who are still incarcerated. Like I said, I'll do a live where we could discuss this sometime during the week. With that said, though, like I said, Shoot the Breeze topic number 2 says,